Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your sacrifices, living and holy sacrifices acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what is the will of God, that is good and acceptable and perfect. Some years ago, when my husband was in seminary, I took part in an experience called Sankofa. Now, this was a pilgrimage for 2 weeks in which you were partnered with a person of the opposite race. And you visited several civil rights highlighted spots along the Civil Rights Trail in Montgomery, Selma, Birmingham, and other places in Virginia and Mississippi. While we were riding on the bus, we watched films like Mississippi Burning, To Kill a Mockingbird, Ghost of Mississippi, Eyes on the Prize, and Crash. And we discussed the effects that watching these films did in priming us for what we were going to experience. The pilgrimage was very enlightening, and we toured historical places like the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 little girls died when a Ku Klux Klan group bombed their church and 4 little girls were killed. One of these little girls was Condoleezza Rice's friend. We toured museums that contained depictions of peaceful marches, lynchings, police brutality, and all manner of racial upheaval. There was a statue in the square of a police using a hose on a teenager, and another statue of a child being ravaged by a police dog. Needless to say, these depictions were so horrifying and upsetting. And I had seen these things on the news as a child growing up. But my partner, who was a young white girl who'd been a missionary in African countries overseas, still was not prepared for how we were going to be affected. We walked around the city. We sat in a burnt out school bus and listened to mannequins hurl racial slurs at us so that we could get the feel of how the freedom riders felt when they were going through these instances. Now, these things are still happening in some form or another, and it's hard to accept that in honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he was a man who was not conformed to the world standards. And many times he came up against people who were not in agreement with his tactics for dealing with racial inequality. And I think because of his stand and how he presented himself, we are living in a world that was changed by many of the ways Dr. King made it important for all Americans to see how some people were treated and how we needed to practice what was printed in the Constitution. So we're honoring Dr. King. What ways have you seen Dr. King's triumphant move in the past affected us today? And what kind of steps do we need to still be making, sisters?
Well, that is quite a question, especially because we've had so many recent instances of racial injustice and
that have never gone away.
And the fact that there is a heightened sense of fear that so many are going to be subjected to violence, race-based violence, injustice in the criminal justice system, economic disparity. And a lot of what Dr. King was fighting was the economic disparity. That has not gone away. So as we look at his impact, which it was profound, I know here in the city of Chicago, the neighborhood of Marquette Park that was so violent in receiving him when he and the protest marchers came, that neighborhood has been opened up to integration, as well as the school systems and everything else, even open housing. And yet there's still an undercurrent of violence that is often race-based, or even the unspoken racial incidences that we see all the time. Just to pick one out of my head, the men that got arrested for sitting in Starbucks, waiting for somebody for a meeting, and those kinds of things, the repeated indignities that happen, the possible threats to your life every time you're stopped at a traffic stop. So there's still the attitudes that exist, even though the laws that upheld them are gone. So I would say when it comes to what else needs to be changed, you have to change the hearts of the people. You can change the laws and you can change the policies that uphold mistreatment, but ultimately, in order for it to disappear, you have to transform what is inside the human being.
I find it interesting that every few months, someone trots out the part of the I Have a Dream speech, totally out of context. Usually it's a white nationalist parading as a politician saying, well, against alleged critical race theory, saying, well, I want my kids to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And they use this out of context because what they're saying is they don't want to be held accountable for what their ancestors did and what they still benefit from. So I started thinking about other things that Dr. King has said. And I encourage everyone, I'm going to read part of it today. I encourage everyone to go online and look up Letter from a Birmingham Jail. Now, if I were to read the entire thing, we would go way over. It's a very long letter that he wrote to several local religious leaders, white religious leaders. But so much of what he said was radical then, radical now, and very, very much on time for now. When we talk about the protest after George Floyd's murder, when we talk about protesting Breonna Taylor's murder, when we get in the streets and we talk about abolishing the police system, not reforming it, but abolishing it, and maybe starting from something else, because the police system was, first, it was for slave catchers. Then it is to protect white people and white property. And so some of the things that we talk about when we talk about law and order, those were the issues that we had back when Dr. Martin Luther King was arrested for peacefully protesting. And I'm going to start with a couple of the things. I just want to go on record with some of these because it's very profound. Now, this was written in August 1963. While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling our present activities unwise and untimely. Seldom, if ever, do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. If I sought to answer all of the criticisms that come across my desk, my secretaries would be engaged in little else in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work. But since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I would like to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. Now, that's just to start, and I have a couple other ones that I highlighted here. But one of the ones that he said was, and this is a pretty long thing, was, you may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You are exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has consistently refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. I just referred to the creation of tension as part of the work of the nonviolent resistor. This may sound rather shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly worked and preached against violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have never yet engaged in a direct action movement that was well timed according to the timetable of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with a piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. Now, I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Now, think about that the next time someone that you know says, well, I want to be an ally. And are you an ally? Are you an accomplice? If you're an accomplice, you're going to help me. If you're an ally, you're going to talk. You're going to talk. You're not going to use your white privilege. You're going to do the whole thing that they used to do with the safety pin that people would wear to show Muslims that they were with them in spirit if they were being harassed in public places. You're going to put a black square on your Instagram. In other words, you're going to be performative. And what we don't need is more performers. We need accomplices. We need people to say, now is when we need to be equal, not when it's less.
Convenient.
When it's more convenient for you, when you feel comfortable. Our job as people of color, and that is Black, Indigenous, Asian, all of us, people of color, we need to be free to live our lives without having to feel like we have to make other people comfortable with our Blackness, with our Asianness, with our Indigenousness, with our Latinx. We need to, and that's one of the things that Dr. King has been teaching us. And we need to stop just stopping with the I have a dream speech and go forward, because he was also for radical change. He was also for equality, not for revenge, but for reparations and equality.
I'd like to throw a thought out there. It's something that was saying, no one can ride your back unless it's bent. We have to take responsibility for what we teach our children about who they are and the powers that they have.
And whose they are.
And whose they are. If you are a child of God, then it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks about you. They cannot change the reality of who and whose you are. And when we empower our children with that understanding very early in life, then we have empowered them to define themselves and define their reality. I think we have stayed too long in the victim mode.
Yes.
Because at this point, with the internet and everything that makes knowledge readily available, there really is no reason for people to still be seeing themselves as minorities, as oppressed, because we're not. And certainly as in any kind of way inferior, because we have never been. No one on this planet is inferior to anyone else. So if we are saying things to our children that plant the idea that there is someone more powerful than them on this earth that they have to acquiesce to, then we have to take responsibility for maintaining the inequality, because we have defined it as such. When we don't have that attitude, our children will not have that attitude. And I have seen the difference in children who were raised by parents who don't have any sense of being suppressed or controlled by anybody. Parents who empower their children with the belief that I can do anything I desire. And parents who have set that example either by the way they conduct themselves, by the way they have been aggressively going after education, after skills, after positions, whether it's starting a business or it's moving ahead in a corporate position where they are taking control, and they are not giving the idea that someone else has to approve of their humanity before they can become a human being. And I think we tend to keep holding on the idea that we must meet the approval of white people. And one thing that Dr. King said, I remember when he spoke about the meeting that they had after the Montgomery bus boycott. Mm-hmm. And they were meeting with the bus company to demand an end to Black people having to ride in the back of the bus. And so they get to this meeting, and he's supposed to be the spokesperson, and he's, shaking and everything, nervous. And
remember, he was a very young
man. He was a very young man. Yeah. Very young man.
He was the age of our kids right now.
Well, yeah. He was younger than them, actually.
Yeah.
He was still in his 20s.
Yeah.
And the demand was that the bus company would allow the Black people would board from the back and the whites would board from the front. And then, if the bus filled up they would be able to sit in whatever seat was available. It's such a modest thing they were asking.
Yeah.
And yet they were turned down. And what Dr. King realized, just the fact that he was so nervous to be asked for that, he said, we have to get the slave out of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the fact of the matter is,
they were paying the same amount.
They're paying the same amount of money. Shouldn't have been anybody born from the back or having to sit anywhere.
Well, they would go in. What they would have to do is they would have to
go in and pay and then go around the back.
Go around the back and hope that the bus didn't take off before they
got there.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you've been in an environment where the abuse is so profound that you are always afraid because everybody is upholding the abuse, the government, the society, the churches, everybody's upholding your oppression, it becomes difficult to break out, which is why he had that letter from the Birmingham jail. When you talk about, you know, the Christian white people who would make them feel like, well, you know, you all are moving a little too fast. There is no such thing as too fast. This shouldn't be at all. It needs to happen now.
And we can't keep shrinking ourselves to make other people feel comfortable.
That should never happen.
We talk about, you know, what Black women have always, and there's the word misogynoir, because of the whole.
Break that down. What that means?
That is a specific hatred toward Black women. Misogyny, misogynoir is MISOGN. Let me see. There's a Y in there somewhere.
Misogynoir.
NOIR.
So that actually means hatred of Black women.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
That
has learned a new word.
That has been a coined term for a few years now, because there is, you know, where we're constantly having to fight the angry Black woman trope when we speak up for ourselves.
And we got to ignore that too. We have to stop having people make us feel bad about being assertive, because there's nothing wrong with that.
If I'm an angry Black woman, then just get out of my way. Yeah. And I have reason to be angry. I have, you know, I don't wake up angry, but if you make me angry, I'm no longer going to shrink myself to make you feel better.
Right.
And that is the thing, is that we have, and there has been a lot of controversy, because we all grew up knowing that we were going to have to play the cards that we were dealt, and we weren't dealt, you know, fairly.
A full deck.
So yeah. So we
Mm-hmm.
were always taught, okay, you have to be twice as good to be treated half as well, or some of that stuff, or be thought of. And you know what?
Yeah. We need to stop teaching that.
We need to stop teaching that.
Stop teaching that to our children.
We need to stop
talking about having the talk. You know what? Look.
We do need the talk.
We need to, if we're going to have a talk, the talk is know the law.
Know the law.
Stand firm in your faith. Look everybody in the eye, no dropping the eye, none of that. Look, if you got an ego problem, I don't care if you got a gun, a badge, or whatever.
But the thing is
the weapon that we have had, which, you know, it's terrible. You keep watching these things happening on Facebook, but we are embarrassing people into right behavior by putting them on blast. Yeah, you got a camera on you. I got a camera on me, and you are live right now. So even if you go back to the station and act like your camera didn't work, mine is working right now, and the world is watching you, and I got you on blast. So I'm not scared of you. I know my rights, and you do what you want to do and see what happens to you, because you're going to jail. Now we know that it's not easy it's easy for me to be bold and Black and everything and female, because I may or may not get treated the same. But I think it's important for us to be intelligent, to be strong, to be fearless, because I'm telling you, we got to break the back of this. And that's what those marchers were. When Dr. King talked about meeting their physical force with soul force, that means you don't fear. You meet them eye to eye. And if a coward looks at you in the eye, they're going to drop their eyes because they know they're cowardly. So we have to teach our sons and daughters that kind of fearlessness, not to be mean, not to be nasty, not to be rude, but just be firm, just to be firm and call people out. You're being racist. You have no reason to stop me. There's no law for this. I don't fit any description of anybody you're stopping. Why are you doing this? The world is watching you. Why are you doing this? Let me announce your name and your badge number so that everybody knows who you are. And I'm going after you after this happens, because you should not be working if you are going to make me fear for my life just because my tail light is out. We can continue to allow this by not saying anything, or we can be proactively fighting it and call out each individual who is still on the streets terrorizing people in the name of the law. because all of that is just the racism hidden. And that's part of what this fight is about. That's part of what Dr. King and all the marches were about, to expose everybody who was still holding that meanness in them and wanted to perpetrate it and get away with it. And now we got a weapon to use. We can put you on blast.
We can also
live.
use the law, because a lot of people are still ending up dead.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Know the law. And I've seen a lot of
I just watched somebody
videos where people
who was
quoted the
tased to
law.
death. They quote the law, but the thing is that the one people, remember we were talking today, I said the one thing we can't just do police reform and put body cameras and those kind of things. We need to just wipe this system clean. We need to stop letting people who are barely out of high school carry guns, and their training is to expose them over and over and over again to cops being killed, so that when they see a Black person, they're automatically, I can't be unarmed if my Blackness is considered a weapon by you. So we need to start thinking about holding these people personally responsible.
So what does that mean? Hold you personally responsible. Does that mean we press charges?
Yes.
You go to jail. That has to be the strategy. We press charges, you go to jail. You go to jail. You go to jail. We've seen some people go to jail.
Civil.
We
sue the cities.
You sue the cities, sue the insurance companies that hold the policies that protect these police officers. Sue everybody that can be sued in these instances, because one thing Dr. King's and the Montgomery bus boycott showed is the power of our economics. And when you go after people's money, things do change. That's why we got
because that company went bankrupt.
That company went bankrupt. And when and right here in Chicago, when people were angry after Laquan McDonald got shot down, and the big protests came, where they said on Black Friday and that whole weekend, we are not going to shop on North Michigan Avenue, because they were angry at the state's attorney at the time, Anita Alvarez, the way she handled it. That's why we got a Black woman state's attorney right now, Kim Foxx, because people were so angry, and the stores lost a whole lot of money when shoppers would not shop on Black Friday, when they were counting on that day to make their profits. So we have to know the power of economics. We have to know the power of our exposing things to the press, because that's what a lot of Dr. King did. That was the whole thing about the Selma and Montgomery march, when everybody saw the brutality.
The whole world started watching.
The whole world was watching. So we have some weapons. We have media, and now everybody's got multimedia right at their fingertips. We have the law. We can go to court. We can sue. We can get people put to jail. And we also have the power of our economic strength and our boycotts, and all of these things that we use can work. And that's the power of Dr. King's movement. Those things work. We have to use them, and use them effectively, and use them fearlessly, and not teach our children that they have to acquiesce to anybody's racism.
I feel that one of Dr. King's strengths was that he built unity among the people, even times when there were groups that were opposed to his methods. I think getting people to be on the same page, if your goal is the same, you may use different methods, but the unity is what strengthens you. I believe there was behind him having his people prayed up and ready for the onslaught, and being able to use that strength of numbers and unity to make the cause achievable. And as I remember going to the museum on the balcony of where he had been shot, it was a very moving moment. They had made that entire hotel into a museum, as well as walking across the bridge with a number, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where everybody walked across together, remembering. Like I said, most of us were children when these incidences happened. We saw it on the news every day, and now for kids after us and our kids and grandkids, this is historical events. But we were there when it was actually happening. And I think that even though people are angry about a lot of injustices, there is still that reticence to give up something in order to advance forward. People are still uncomfortable with making a move that's going to cost them something. These young people who were sitting at restaurant counters, having people pour hot coffee in their faces and slamming into them and throwing things at them and hitting them, and they're withstanding it, and then they're all being hauled off into patrol wagons and taken downtown and serving time in jail. You know, there's a number of movies out that depict all of these things, and I sometimes wonder if in watching these things we're kind of glorying in the civil rights era. That was a time when we did this, this, and this, and this. What are people doing now?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because some of the strategies that have been used may not be as effective because the situation is different. It's not as blatant, and it's more systematic. And so you have to think of what are new strategies based on new conditions. And
what are we willing to sacrifice?
We've got a couple of comments here. Sure, I'll let you read these.
The one that says from Mama Bonfire, thank us.
Yes. Us, it stands for United Spirits. And then you can read this one. I believe that's
this is Curtis Kojo Morrow, and he says, very few African Americans or others, for what it's worth, remember Black history other than sportsmen and entertainers. And that's true. You know,
I need to get this calendar.
Yeah, okay. All right, we've probably got to go now. We've gone over our time. And think about what you're willing to give up for the cause being equality.
Well, I think also one of the things that we have to take a look at is, as we have the elections coming up, you know, we fought a long time for voters' rights. Okay,
right.
So now we have the right to vote. So now let's use it and elect people to office. We have integration and everything else in our college, our education systems, elementary, high school, colleges. Well, let's use the power of our education and gain knowledge and skills. So a lot of the things that we fought for, we now have, which is why our language has to change.
We need to take advantage of it.
We need to take advantage of it and give our children a sense of empowerment, because they have these things that we fought, and purpose. And
I will say North Park still does those Sankofa missions where young people, college age and high school age, can experience the civil rights experience, to make them aware. A lot of people, they see these things in history and don't realize how they impact how we live and perceive things today. Those kind of experiences are still available to give people an awareness and a compassion to want to become involved. A lot of people's lives were changed on that 2-week excursion. Many people decided to go into some kind of urban missions to deliberately leave their places of privilege and really make changes in neighborhoods where those kind of changes mattered greatly.
Yes, and I think we can still do that, but also, in looking back, the intention is to learn from it and not be stuck in the past,
right,
with anger, desires for vengeance, or just angry at random white people for being white, because none of that is productive. Like you were saying, we need to have our children have a purpose. Why are you learning? Why are these doors opening for you? So that you can be an Obama and run the nation, so that you can be a Tyler Perry and have your own TV studio, so you can be an Oprah and own your own network, so that you can be these people who own things, who control things, who are the heads of industry, who are heads of government, so that you can be the people who are in control. No one is controlling you now. You have the power in your hands, and don't be afraid to use it. And see that when you actually do focus on the content of your character, people will entrust you with leadership and authority. And so aim for that, and don't ever see yourself as lesser than anybody, and never be afraid to fight for justice.
Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't invite you to the table, you bring your own chair. And from that, you know what? If you got to build your own table, do that too.
Do that too. That's right. Well, we got to go, people. We know that this coming Monday, there was a tornado in Selma, but I believe the organizers are still trying to pull together a celebration to commemorate that historic march from Selma to Montgomery, and the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Yeah.
So, look out for that. We'll
Very powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And there are celebrations all over the world for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I think that's the greatest thing that he left us with. He left a legacy that changed the world. Freedom movements everywhere were inspired by what happened in America, led by Dr. King and those who decided they were not going to stand for oppression anymore. They're not going to tolerate it anymore. And so everywhere from South Africa to all across the world, people who were oppressed were singing "We Shall Overcome" and imitating the civil rights struggle. And many of them did. So that's the legacy of Dr. King. He gave
the door
and strength, and to remember that we are all one united humanity. And so when everybody wakes up to that, that's the kind of world we can create. So, last words before we go.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Dr. King. And may we continue to make America great because of you. Well, until next time, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black moms.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black moms.